Breece Hall has an unfortunate season-ending injury. What does that mean for his dynasty value? And really, what does that mean for dynasty as a whole? That and more today on the Dynasty Newsletter. I'm your host, Adam Wilde, not joined by my co-host, Chris Allen. He is on assignment today. So you guys have got me to be discussing Breece Hall. This is quite the unfortunate turn of events for Breece Hall, excuse me, who looks to be one of the most promising, if not actually the most promising running back in all of Dynasty, as we've seen Jonathan Taylor just really not quite cut it for us this year. Nothing really to do with Jonathan Taylor's performance in itself, so much as the Colts offense as a whole. And as we've seen today, they've made a change at quarterback because things are just not working there. So Breece Hall was on a fast track to maybe overall 101, but definitely running back one. And the reason that it might not have been overall 101 is for what we're going to talk about today is just that it's getting very, very difficult to keep a running back towards the top of the first round in dynasty startup drafts right now because they're just getting injured. Just we've had huge injuries. Javonte Williams this year. Jonathan Taylor's been injured, missed time, missed games, and has had a horrendous offense. And then we've had guys like Kamara not really showing up for us. That whole guard, even Leonard Fournette, after a strong start to the season, the whole Tampa Bay offense has been falling apart. So all the guys at the top have been falling dramatically, and we're back to, if you've been playing for the past 10 years, about 7 years ago, where it was mostly wide receivers. Now a little bit before that we had some quarterbacks towards the top too, so that's a different story, but we are back to a point where we're pretty much ranking wide receivers all throughout the top of the first round, and we're not going to fit a running back up there. So with that being said, what are we going to do with Breece Hall? Well, it's really, he really got hurt probably two more monster performances from being the running back one already. So what are you going to do with him now that he's torn his ACL? Well, you have two options. You can assume that he was going to continue the pace that he was, continue to get more snaps, or you can say that there wasn't enough information, and then you're just not going to be in the market for trading for or away Breece Hall. So I'm going to actually go with Breece Hall was probably going to be on the fast track to running back one. The only problem with that is that we've got a couple guys coming out next year, specifically Bijan Robinson, who would have probably been top three running back right off the bat, and maybe even two. So it's really difficult to say, oh, well, I would rather have Breece Hall in the top 10, or I'd rather have Jonathan Taylor in the top 10, or any of these guys, when you could really probably trade them for an early first that has a shot for being the 101, get Robinson, and then you get a little reset at running back for a running back that's probably going to end up being running back one overall sooner rather than later. The problem is if you don't get the 101 with that trade, you didn't get nearly enough for Jonathan Taylor, for your Breece Hall. So that's a risk. It's really hard to do that right now. I mean, if you're going to trade Breece Hall, Javonte Williams, guys like that right now, you're going to want to get like a first and something, the first and an ancillary piece, because you're just not sure you're going to get that 101. And if somebody is sure they're going to get the 101, they sure as heck are not trading it for an injured running back. So that's just not going to happen. All you can do is trade for a first that you project to be early and hope that that team has a bad streak, goes and gets the 101. If someone's pretty much got the 101 locked up, there's zero chance at this point that they're trading for Breece Hall, that they're trading for Javonte Williams. So really the only chance that you have if you have Breece Hall is trading for a first and something else and just hoping that you get the 101. Or if you want to trade for Breece Hall right now, obviously he might take a little bit of a discount, but people are fresh off of seeing 3 straight weeks of Breece Hall being unbelievable. The efficiency, the power he displayed. I mean, every walk of life in Dynasty would have loved Breece Hall the last few weeks. Film, analytics, both all saw what Breece Hall has done over the past 3 weeks on not even a full workload, which he would have gotten sooner rather than later at that pace, even with Michael Carter doing decent. Breece Hall's workload was just going to continue. So nobody's ready to trade him right now. People are bitter right now, and I always say when you have a high profile player that's lost to injury, give it a few weeks to relax because nobody wants to feel like they're being taken advantage of. Nobody wants to feel like their intelligence is being insulted. So it's really tough when a player goes down and then you get all these trade offers. You almost reject them immediately without even looking because you're so upset either for the guy, you feel for the guy, as a member of your team, as someone that you cheer for, or just you're mad because your team is not nearly as good anymore. So nobody's going to accept any low ball offers for Breece Hall right now. You might be able to later in the season try to leverage the situation with a team that needs points and trade a significant running back for Breece Hall or for Javonte Williams because the team needs those points right now. So they might be able to take a little bit of a loss, say reversing the trade that I did a few weeks ago. So I traded Breece Hall for Najee Harris and a third. I felt terrible. I probably shouldn't have done that. It was right before Breece Hall went absolutely nuclear, but you could probably reverse that now. You could probably send Najee Harris for like Breece Hall because they're going to want the Najee Harris points now. So those are some ideas that you can do with Breece Hall, but it's just really unfortunate to lose a player like that. And like I said, change the whole landscape of Dynasty because people are tired of spending first round capital on these running backs and not panning out. It just can't happen. You are spending first round startup capital on someone like Jonathan Taylor because he is supposed to single handedly win you games and ultimately single handedly win you leagues. You can't take duds from those guys. And in past years, you weren't. In past years, you were getting Jonathan Taylor 25 points a game, locked and loaded, no problem. This year, you have not been getting that, but you know who you have been getting that from is your wide receivers, your Justin Jeffersons, your Jamar Chases, even A.J. Brown, Cooper Kupp, all of those guys who were cheaper than those running backs are vastly outproducing those running backs. And there's going to be a massive shift in dynasty value coming down the pipeline because of this. People are reactionary, especially in season. Dynasty turns into redraft at some point during the season, and people are going to be tired of their running backs getting outproduced by these wide receivers. So in these mock drafts people are doing, they're going to start taking wide receivers, almost spite drafting at that point, and we're going to see value shifting. So if you have these high price running backs and you want to get away from that movement, you see that coming, it's not a bad time to explore some trades and see if you could get some your guys like CD Lamb might be a good target right now. Jalen Waddle, something like that. T. Higgins might be another good target for you to tear down at your running back position and grab some of those wide receivers who are undoubtedly going to be ascending just as people continue to see that the running back position is not doing what it has done in years past. Whether it could be various reasons too. I mean, this could just be a minor blip on a very long season in which we see the running backs come back to their former glory. Of course, it's only been 6, 7 games into the season, so we don't have all the answers right now. But what we do have, wide receivers are getting banged up less, and they are producing almost as much as the running backs in this today's NFL. We have running back splitting touches, good running back splitting touches. Like I mentioned, Breece Hall was doing great, but he was still only getting 65% of the touches because Michael Carter was doing well too. So you have these wide receivers running routes on 100% of the quarterbacks dropbacks. You have quarterbacks dropping back more often. So there's just going to have to be a shift, especially when you factor in the the fragility of the running back position. So that'll lead us into talking about another top running back, someone who I just wrote an article on. So if you want to check out Cutting Through the Noise, I write it once a week to take an objective look at the most polarizing players in Dynasty. Last week, I explored Christian McCaffrey as soon as he was traded. So we have Christian McCaffrey monster trade from the Carolina Panthers to the San Francisco 49ers. And we explored, was that a good thing or a bad thing? Ultimately, it's probably a neutral thing because Christian McCaffrey's value is dropping due to age anyways. And yes, I know everybody gets taken aback. He's only 26. I get it, but he's 5 years into the league, and running backs don't last nearly as long as you would like them to. I mean, when was the last running back that you saw at 27, 28 producing like they did when they were 22? It doesn't happen anymore. You need running backs to produce right away, and you need them to produce until they're about 25, 26. Anything past that you are lucky, and the value is only going to go down. There's nothing that Christian McCaffrey can do at this point in time to increase his value because his age is going to go up, and there's nothing that can be done about his age going up. I'm sorry about it. I don't necessarily agree with it. It's not exactly how I play Dynasty, but as a whole, the Dynasty community is never going to value Christian McCaffrey more than they do now. And next week, they're not going to value him more than they do then. So if you have Christian McCaffrey, you're at a crossroads. Like I mentioned in the article, we got to this crossroads last year, and we talked about on the show between Chris and I with Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry signed a new contract. Derrick Henry was in the news, and we got to look at that and say, do I ride out this contract with Derrick Henry knowing that every second his value gets lower? Or do I make a trade for him now because he's in the news and maybe he gets a tiny value bump? And that's what you have to do with Christian McCaffrey going to the 49ers, going to Kyle Shanahan's offense, who you would look at that and you would say that it's a good thing because we have that whole perception that Kyle Shanahan's a mastermind. We have the perception that the 49ers rushing offense is so phenomenal. But what they don't do is they don't pass to the running back. So you have Christian McCaffrey, the best pass catching running back in the league, maybe second to maybe Austin Eckler at this point, but still one of the best running backs of the last 10 years. And you have him going to an offense that isn't going to utilize him appropriately. So he's going to a zone run scheme and where they're going to look at Christian McCaffrey and say, well, I mean, you're just incredible. You're not the perfect fit for offense, but you're incredible. So we traded for you. And that'll probably work out for the 49ers in a way, but it's not necessarily going to work out for Christian McCaffrey, right? So he is probably going to do about the same that he would have done with the Carolina Panthers. They would have passed him the ball more, but the offense for the 49ers is better as a whole. You get a bump here, you get a downgrade there, and eventually you end up at the same value, and you're still back to the point where it's, well, Christian McCaffrey is a 26-year-old running back. Do I ride into the sunset with him, or do I make a trade? I think you probably make a trade now, especially if you're getting a first and a little extra. But if you're competing, I mean, you need Christian McCaffrey, so you cannot trade away Christian McCaffrey if you're competing and expect to continue to compete in almost every scenario. So my advice is if you're not competing, and let's add strong contender. If you're not a strong contender, you're probably exploring trade options for to trade away Christian McCaffrey. If you are a strong contender, he's just on your roster, and it's the type of thing where how valuable is a championship to you? A championship is what we should all be striving for. So you keep Christian McCaffrey on your roster, and yeah, eventually you're probably going to have to either take a pretty significant loss in a trade with him, or you just have him until he retires, which is okay. Before we get to the next segment, let's talk about the Footballguys newsletter straight to your inbox from Joe Bryant, contributions from Cecil Lammy, Sigmund Bloom. They're going to bring you all the news and notes from around the league straight to your inbox, all in one email, so you get all caught up on everything that happened throughout the week in just one email. You don't need all the different notifications from Sleeper, ESPN, all those apps that are sending you all the information as it comes in, and you might miss some of that too. But if you get the email newsletter from Joe Bryant, you're going to get all that in one place. Bam, read through it, caught up, good to go. So check out the email newsletter coming from Joe Bryant from Footballguys, and we take tidbits from that newsletter and create the Dynasty newsletter for you guys. So we take tidbits from there that are Dynasty relevant, and we discuss those between Chris and I. What we're going to discuss next is Joe Burrow and his ranking as the quarterback 6, I believe. Yep, 6. So Joe Burrow's had a tough time getting into the top 5, and it's really because Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and Lamar Jackson have been locked in. That's just simple. Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes have the long-term contracts. They're the 2 best offenses in the league. That's easy. Lamar Jackson does not have a long-term contract, but because he is such a unique player, scores in so many different ways, he is going to remain at the top. Already has an MVP, only 25 years old. Totally get that. The question now is, does Joe Burrow deserve to be ranked behind Justin Herbert and Jalen Hurts? Well, if you go just by yesterday, no, absolutely not. He does not deserve to be behind Jalen Hurts and Herbert. But It's not just based off of yesterday. So Jalen Hurts does not have a long-term contract, and he's a second-round quarterback, and the team wasn't bought into him really before this year to begin with, and now it seems like he's their complete heart and soul. So Jalen Hurts is not easy for us as dynasty managers to evaluate because we don't everything outside of football we don't understand. What we can see is that the team seems to love him, rally around him. You see a great presser from him after every game, so humble. Just keep on going. Don't care about the fact that we're 6-0. And then he goes out there and he puts together great. He's had 300-yard games. He's had 100-yard rushing games. He's doing everything that Lamar Jackson did in his MVP season. And really, Lamar Jackson was a late first round pick, so it's not even like that was expected of him either. So that's the situation where you say, do you feel better about Joe Burrow, who, for all the things he's great at, he is one dimensional. I mean, he was a better rusher before he tore his ACL. Obviously, doesn't really need rushing now, but he has a phenomenal supporting cast. Is it better than Jalen Hurts' supporting cast? Well, technically, but not by a ton, right? I mean, okay, Jamar Chase is better than AJ Brown by how much? A little, right? Um, Devonta Smith and T. Higgins are probably tied. Maybe a nod goes to T. Higgins, right? And then Dallas Goedert significantly better than Hayden Hurst. Okay, Joe Mixon slightly better than Miles Sanders. Some might say more than others. So the point I'm getting at here in this long-winded response is that you have very similar situations. The only difference is that Joe Burrow was drafted first overall. He's going to get a monster contract like any day now. And Jalen Hurts was drafted in the second round a few years ago. But Jalen Hurts has rushing and passing upside. So the toss-up right there is really, I'm probably going to lead on Joe Burrow just because I know what his future looks like. It's going to be something like the 10-year Patrick Mahomes contract, and I don't know if you get that from Jalen Hurts, even though you should. Huge Jalen Hurts believer. He was my profile picture for quite some time, banner, whatever. But I don't know if the team is going to value him appropriately, and you're splitting hairs here. I mean, you're still going to keep Jalen Hurts in your top 5 or your top 6. But it's not like you downgrade him a ton. It's just I think that you have a surefire thing with Joe Burrow that you might not have with Jalen Hurts. Remember, it's only been 7 games through the year. Does not look like the Eagles are stopping anytime soon, but all that being said, Joe Burrow is slightly safer. So let's put Joe Burrow at probably 4, right? So now you have Jalen Hurts and Justin Herbert. My goodness, is this one frustrating? Um, it, there's there's not much to say about it. Justin Herbert deserves more than what the Chargers are providing for him. Now, Keenan Allen has been down, and that's probably going to hurt him when you have one of the best possession receivers, if not the best possession receiver in the NFL, on the sideline. That's going to hurt your quarterback play for sure. But Austin Eckler has been doing all the work for him. So you would imagine that Justin Herbert would be getting some relief in that situation. Mike Williams shows up every other game, right? So, and now he's got the high ankle sprain that we can discuss in a moment. So there's really not too many excuses except for Brandon Staley just not getting the job done as the head coach, which is unfortunate because he's a guy you like to root for. So Justin Herbert is probably going to end up being the odd man out, which is insane. I mean, people were ranking Justin Herbert as the quarterback 1 overall prior to the year. And looking in hindsight, maybe a bit of a stretch. At the time, I didn't think it was crazy. But to rank him over Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen at this point seemed like it was just a reach for the sake of reaching. But 3 was fine, given the Lamar Jackson contract situation. And there were times in the offseason where we thought that Lamar Jackson might not play for a little bit of a time there. So that made a little bit of sense to put Justin Herbert over top of Lamar Jackson. But now you're looking at the situation like, well, they're not really doing poorly enough to fire Brandon Staley. And Brandon Staley, for everything he's good at, is the clear problem. He and Lombardi, of course, but he's an enabler. So it's clearly not going to change, right? Unless he switches offensive coordinators, which is probably not going to happen. So you're really in a situation where we've got at least the next 2 years where Justin Herbert is going to look a lot like he did right now. And we thought we were getting Super Bowl contenders, and we're probably not getting a playoff team out of the Chargers, which is just insane to think about. So Justin Herbert, if you want to rank him behind Jalen Hurts, that's totally fine. But it seems like at this point, you're just thinking, is it Joe Burrow or is it Jalen Hurts at quarterback 4? I'm going to go with Joe Burrow, and that makes him a top 5 dynasty quarterback with potentially room to grow depending on what we see from Lamar Jackson. That leads to Jamar Chase, who started out a little bit well, he started out hot, then he had a little bit of a lull there, and it just seems like he's gonna be more of a it's hard to even say boom bust player. It's almost like Jamar Chase needs his own category because his booms are remarkable and his busts are like, okay, he got his 12 points. So, I mean, is it really a boom bust? I still prefer him over pretty much actually, definitely over any running back at this point. Not even pretty much, definitely would prefer Jamar Chase over any running back at this point. The only player ranked ahead of him in general for me is Justin Jefferson, and that's a coin flip. I mean, I wrote an article that compared the two, and it was pretty much we have to pick something. So I'll go with Justin Jefferson. But at this point, after seeing a few games like last week, maybe I would rank Jamar Chase as the number one overall dynasty asset. So with that being said, I mean, running back is just going to have to take a back seat to your Justin Jeffersons and your Jamar Chases of the world going forward. But we're not getting just a two-man show. I mean, T. Higgins is still a phenomenal player. He's been injured lately, and that's definitely affecting the box scores. But he still had 93 yards this week. And then Tyler Boyd still, I mean, you could almost get Tyler Boyd for a third probably at points in the offseason. And Tyler Boyd has just produced another big game with his 12 to 13% target share. He's still getting it done. And then Hayden Hurst, 6 targets, 6 catches, still getting it done. So it's not just Jalen. Joe Burrow has just been the tide that raised all ships for the Cincinnati Bengals, and it should only continue. So if you don't want to, like I advised in the article, actually, if you don't want to hinder your team by trading pretty much everything of value for Jamar Chase, you can still afford to get someone like T. Higgins. And the other name I mentioned was Jalen Waddle. That's a great one too, but you can still trade for T. Higgins if you want a piece of the Bengals offense without, mortgaging your entire future. You're still going to have to pay plenty for T, of course, but not quite as much as you would need to pay for Chase. We'll talk about two more very important dynasty assets that are lacking of late, and we'll just put them together. Kyle Pitts and Drake London. I've been talking to a lot of different friends on Twitter about this, and people from both sides of the aisle. Right, we had the great Kyle Pitts debate, and it was always, well, why would you pay so much for Kyle Pitts when you could just get him a year later for cheaper? The problem with that is not the problem that everyone thinks. So one side of the aisle is like, well, of course his value is not going to be worse next year because he's incredible. It's not that his value couldn't get worse. It's that the people who were on the side of the aisle of Kyle Pitts never losing value are the people who have Kyle Pitts. So I always agreed with them, but for different reasons. They have Kyle Pitts. So there's nothing that's going to decrease Kyle Pitts' value. There's no person in Dynasty that has Kyle Pitts on their team that was on the other side of the great Kyle Pitts debate, right? So it's just not going to, his value is going to stay no matter what, because the people who have him were the ones who said his value was going to stay. So either way, it doesn't matter what side of the argument you stand on. All that really matters is that you had to pay a very hefty price for very, very disappointing production. And it's 100% Arthur Smith's fault. Arthur Smith is not only wasting Kyle Pitts, but he is wasting Drake London, who they just spent the 8th overall pick on. So you've got a 4th overall pick at receiver playing tight end. You have the 8th overall pick at receiver playing receiver. You brought in Marcus Mariota, and you are running at one of the highest rates in the league. It's just unbelievable. But there's nothing that we can do about it. It's Arthur Smith's, second year. He's not getting fired anytime soon. The offense is actually doing okay at times with Marcus Mariota passing 15 times a game on par with Justin Fields. So you're in a situation where you're just going to have to keep telling yourself in the mirror, Kyle Pitts is going to work out. Kyle Pitts is going to work out, because it's going to be a long road ahead of us for those who have Kyle Pitts on their roster. It's going to be a lot of suffering, confusion, anger, all the stages of grief, until you get to the point where it's like, okay, year 5, he really is Megatron. And he's a tight end. So, I mean, we could see Kyle Pitts into 33, 34 being Travis Kelce, right? Travis Kelce should be his ceiling. Now, people who have Kyle Pitts think Travis Kelce isn't his ceiling. Calvin Johnson's his ceiling. I don't necessarily agree with that. I've never necessarily agreed with that as long as he has the tight end designation next to his name. I don't think that's going to happen, unfortunately, unless you got a very creative offensive coordinator, but those seem to be few and far between. Even the ones that we think we like are not panning out so much. So I don't think that there's going to be any offensive coordinator that will make Kyle Pitts into Calvin Johnson, but I do think he can be Travis Kelce, the next generation's Travis Kelce. We just have to wait a little. And Travis Kelce wasn't Travis Kelce right away either, so it's not that crazy. It's just that we paid so much more for Kyle Pitts right now than we paid for Travis Kelce because we knew Kyle Pitts should be Travis Kelce right now and not in year 3, 4, or 5. Should be Travis Kelce right now. But the fact of the matter is that he isn't. How much practical information or practical advice can I give on the topic right now? If you want to still trade for Kyle Pitts because you believe in it and you want 3 years from now to have Travis Kelce, I understand it, and you can try, but more than likely you're not going to end up getting Kyle Pitts for anything reasonable. And if you have Kyle Pitts, are you going to trade him knowing that he could be Calvin Johnson? No, you're not going to. So I don't expect to see many Kyle Pitts trades over the next 3 years, really. And so Twitter's going to get to debate this one for quite some time. I'm glad I didn't really take a stance on this one because I do. I mean, anybody with eyes knows that Kyle Pitts is incredible. Best tight end prospect ever, easily. There's no hyperbole there. Easily the best tight end prospect ever. Doesn't matter. It does not matter one bit unless Arthur Smith decides to start utilizing him like Travis Kelce. Not even, let's not even start with Calvin Johnson, right? Let's start by using him like Travis Kelce, and we're nowhere near there. So that brings us to Drake London, and how are we ever going to find out what we're getting out of him? We get first-round misses at wide receiver constantly, right? We've been blessed recently in recent years with a ton of first-round production. I mean, we've still got your Jalen Reagor here and there. Even Andy Isabella snuck into the back half of the first. So you've still had some misses recently, but we've been getting a lot of really good first round production. And we're not going to know if we get that this year. We've got Garrett Wilson being ruined by Zach Wilson. Garrett Wilson was on pace for the most targets in the league. Top 5 most targets in the league through the first 3 weeks. And then we get terrible showing from Joe Flacco, and then we get Zach Wilson back, and it's like he doesn't exist. Okay, so Garrett Wilson getting ruined by Zach Wilson. Treylon Burks had a horrible offseason, really just mostly slander, right? But he clearly didn't have a great offseason, and then comes in, starts picking up the pace, starts looking really good, injured. Great. You got Drake London. Drake London should be the best of the bunch right now. Well, he has no opportunity. I mean, he's getting targets, but they're not catchable targets. He's being, 8 targets last week, but I think he only had 3 receptions. It's just, I mean, you're getting targeted by Marcus Mariota. And is it really going to change with people calling for Desmond Ridder? Probably not. It's probably Arthur Smith's offense. And then you have Jameson Williams, of course, who has really done nothing negative. It's just that we hoped we'd see him by now, and we don't. And the Lions don't have a lot of incentive to play him. The Lions could give him a redshirt rookie season, and it would be perfectly viable at this point. They're 1-5. There's really no reason for Jameson Williams to play besides just like maybe getting his feet under him, but they're probably going to get a new quarterback next year anyways. So does it really matter if Jameson Williams plays this year? I don't really know. He's still my wide receiver too because everything has been so negative for everybody else. But it's just been really tough to how are we supposed to value this rookie class as dynasty managers when we can't get, I mean, I guess you could say how much does it really matter what the players do when their environment is either negative or positive? If they play for the Chiefs, then maybe how much does it matter how good they are? Now Sky Moore is putting that to the test, but Sky Moore's not really the caliber player that we would like that comparison with anyways, right? Like if you put Garrett Wilson on the Chiefs, okay, probably top 5, 6 wide receiver in the dynasty in terms of dynasty rankings, but you don't have him on the Chiefs. You have him on the Jets. So what does that do for his dynasty rankings? Do you hold him there because he is Garrett Wilson, or do you lower him because he's on the Jets, right? So, how much does it even matter how good the players are once we get to the NFL? That's a question that we're always going to have to battle and put different percentages on. How much percentage am I giving to the player's ability, and how much percentage am I giving to the team, the surroundings, the front office, all of that other extra stuff that factors into these humans playing this game, right? So, it's going to be a long road to try to evaluate this wide receiver class. It's not a bust. It hasn't been great, but it hasn't been terrible either. It's just really difficult to tell through 6 weeks. Hopefully we get um, so you could tell yourself a story for this to turn around too. I mean, if Zach Wilson ends up getting benched, which it looks like he's on trending in that direction, then we can get Joe Flacco targeting Garrett Wilson again. As crazy as that sounds, Drake London, any game now he should connect. I mean, he's had a decent game so far this year. He's getting targeted at a good clip. It's just the offense is the problem. So he could connect at any time. Traylon Burks will be back, and then maybe Jameson Williams just starts lighting the league on fire right away, and we can be excited about this rookie class. But that's going to do it for me today. Thank you all so much for coming out. Please like, subscribe, rate, and review. I'll be back with Chris Allen next Monday. And remember, we are on a different Spotify channel from the Audible. So if you used to be listening to us on the Audible, we are now on our own channel. So please make sure you're subscribed to that, and we will catch y'all next week. Peace.